Jen, it's Monday night, and I know there's something that made you do a spit take. What'd you disagree with this week?
Dude, I spit out my coffee, water, juice, beverage. The fact that John Fox got another job in the NFL. I am so annoyed. The guy, first of all, I mean, the game has passed him by. Let's be real. He's been out of the NFL for 5 seasons. You tell me the Colts couldn't find somebody else? I mean, granted, look, he's an like what assistant defensive something or other. Fine. I refuse to believe that there's someone, in a better position in the modern era of the NFL to possibly go in there and get some life into that team than John Flippin' Fox. That's my cold open or my cold spit take. I'm sorry. There it is.
I bet it's just he's the sandwich guy. That's it. Reich was like, I need a sandwich guy. Who knows sandwiches in Indy? Somebody said, get John Fox. Get him over here. He knows a good pastrami. That's what it is. Excellent spit take, Jen. Now let's get to the show. Welcome, everyone, to the most accurate podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brandon Niles. With me are my excellent co-hosts, Jen Eakins and Chris Allen. Chris, how you doing today, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm a little bit better than Jen after her spit take against, hating on John Fox, which I completely understand. Once I saw the news, I rolled my eyes myself. So I 100% get it. But other than that, I'm doing well, ready to talk ball with y'all tonight. Jen, how are you doing other than being upset with the Colts?
I'm good. Listen, I just got back from a couple-day vacay. It was the kids' spring break.
Nice.
So we headed down to Canyon City, which is a couple hours south of Denver. Got to see the Royal Gorge, and we crossed the largest suspension bridge in North America. So it was pretty sweet. I've lived in Denver for 26 years and have never been down there. So that was a cool thing. Came back, saw the John Fox news, was a little peeved. Other than that, I am fantastic. Yeah, I'm good. I missed a bunch of stuff, so we definitely need to get into it. Brandon, what's in the news?
Not a lot of news this week, honestly. Since the Tyreek Hill news on Thursday, which the Johns covered in depth Thursday night, go check out that episode if you haven't gotten their take on it. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack there that they go in depth in, and we're going to continue to watch that over the offseason to see what Kansas City does. But there is, speaking of Kansas City, one thing that I saw happen that I wanted to get your takes on. Ronald Jones goes to Kansas City. Ronald Jones, one of the most disparate situations on Twitter in fantasy football, I believe. People love Ronald Jones, hardcore Rojo believers, or think he's utter garbage. So doesn't seem like there's a middle point. Chris, where are you on Ronald Jones here in Kansas City? How does this affect the Chiefs? How does this affect Rojo? And how does it affect Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
I do not care at this point. I don't care. Because because Ronald Jones doesn't provide that skill set that we would want to be a part of a Patrick Mahomes-led offense. He doesn't catch passes, or at least he doesn't catch them well. That was his big problem coming out of college. It's been a part of his problem since he's been with the Buccaneers. And even when he had his opportunities with Tom Brady, who arguably is a better passer than Patrick Mahomes, he still was dropping the ball. And so now he goes to a team where the running back isn't a huge feature as a part of their offense. I mean, bottom 10 in targets to the running back position just this past season. So unless we're assuming some sort of role where he might become the goal line back for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even though from a size perspective, it's not like he has 10 to 15 pounds on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I can't even see that. So other than cannibalizing Edwards-Helaire's role, I don't really see a ton of value for either of the two at this point. So if you're not catching passes for the Chiefs, I'm really not all that interested in you, to be quite honest.
Jen, are you interested in either of these backs, or do you agree with Chris that they kind of cancel each other out?
I agree with Chris, and I happen to be one of those few that you mentioned that you said there's no middle ground. I'm the middle ground. Like I'm not into Rojo. I'm not anti-Rojo. I just he's kind of meh for me. I mean, that's of course in Tampa Bay as it's been. This move, on this podcast, we talk a lot about Merck, and I feel like in Kansas City, it's always Merck in that running back room. And here we are again. And I think that neither of them are going to be anything fantastic for fantasy. I think there's, like Chris said, unless you're catching passes in that offense, I don't see, him being that productive or that fruitful as a fantasy asset.
Darrell Williams is still unsigned. Do you think they're done, Jen, or do you think they add anyone else to that running back room?
Oh, it's Andy Reid. They're adding for sure. Yeah, he's not done. There'll be at least another body or two at some point in the next month.
Chris, let's go to Tampa. We saw Leonard Fournette re-signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after flirting with New England. Rojo now out of the picture there. We still got, former fantasy Twitter darling Keshawn Vaughn is there. Obviously, a lot of offseason left to go. But right now, Leonard Fournette, are we going into the season confident with him as the starter and as a solid fantasy asset?
Absolutely. If we looked at the evolution of his workload throughout the course of the season last year, because remember when we came into the 2021 season, it was kind of a struggle between him and the newly acquired Giovanni Bernard. And we had assumed that with the team essentially going out and signing Bernard, that the roles were defined. I mean, Leonard Fournette could be essentially the between the tackles kind of guy, maybe catch a couple of passes here and there, essentially what they wanted for Ronald Jones. But then for those third down situations, for those 2-minute drill situations, that's where Gio could come in. Because of injuries, not really getting in sync with the offense, Leonard Jones took over that entirety of that backfield to the point where snaps were going up, target share was going up, goal line presence was there as well. So essentially, Leonard Fournette became their workhorse back. And so with Gio, while if he's going to stay with the team or not, it doesn't matter at this point. With Rojo also being gone, Leonard Fournette has already shown he's capable of handling the workload, capable of being efficient while doing so. And with the other pass catchers, with us having some concerns about Godwin's injury at this point, I can just see Leonard Fournette continuing essentially where he left off at the end of 2021. So he's an RB1 for me.
Excellent. And Jen, your cat Twizzler had another meeting and couldn't make this podcast today. However, I know Twizzler left us some notes. What's Twizzler's take now that he knows that Leonard Fournette is back with the Bucs?
Twizzler's very pleased with Leonard Fournette staying with the Bucs. Twizzler sees him as an RB1. He's very excited about it. During the season, he will be back on every week to tell you his thoughts from week to week on the fantasy output of Mr. Fournette.
And the status of the window. I
and
know
the status of the window. He may show up, within the next however long we do this pod. For now, he is otherwise engaged downstairs, but we will see what happens.
Excellent. That's all I've got for the news. I want to do some draft content, some way early draft content. But before we get into that, let's hit stat of the week.
All right, so for this week, my stat of the week, it comes with on the heels of all the moves that we've been seeing throughout free agency, the trades, the blockbuster deals that we've seen happening. And I kind of want to try to figure out what is the reason for some of this? And I want to go all the way back to the Super Bowl. The Rams and the Bengals, it's the first time in at least the Super Bowl era that 2 4 seeds have come to the Super Bowl, have wound up making to the Super Bowl. In the last 22 Super Bowls, 17 of them have featured at least one number 1 seed. So you can talk about how the teams, team building and whatnot, but with the league seeing how these teams were able to get there, with Cincinnati taking Jamar Chase and kind of pairing him with his college quarterback, drafting T. Higgins, also being able to just put that offense together, and then also having the retooling their defense while working on their offense as well and getting that guy at quarterback. And the same thing with the Rams, trading for Matthew Stafford, also making the trades to bring in Von Miller, Odell Beckham. So, draft picks have now become this thing where, all right, we don't want to hoard them and just try and save them and try and make those lottery picks. We can actually now use them as a way to build our teams. And so I think that's part of the reason why we've seen a lot of these blockbuster deals. It's changing the way that we see how teams will wind up building themselves in the future. If you think about it, over the past, even the past couple of decades, we've been pretty good, or at least the league has been pretty good about putting together at least the best teams, right? The first seed versus the second seed, or 2 first seeds, fairly common, especially throughout the 70s and 80s. But now with the league trending more towards passing, with the deals that we've now seen here in free agency from Christian Kirk to Devontae Adams to Tyreek Hill, I can just continue to see like this era of football being much more, I guess, risk, the teams being able to take on more risk by making some of these trades. And I think what we saw here in the Super Bowl with teams that we didn't essentially think could make it to the Super Bowl with 2 4 seeds being more of the norm than it being an outlier. I don't know. I mean, Brandon, like, what do you think? Like after, I mean, from the trivia stuff that we've done in the past, like what these Super Bowls have been like. I mean, some of the best teams. I mean, whether it's been the Patriots for however many years with Tom Brady, I mean, whomever the case may be. I think the last time that we saw like at least 2 non-first seed teams in were I think the Ravens and 49ers back in like 2012. And actually, I think the Rams Patriots, I think might have been 2 like non-first teams, at least one with the non-first seed teams.
What's weird about this is like these 2 4 seeds, neither one of them felt like a 4 seed, right? Like going into this, the Rams felt like a 1 seed and the Bengals felt like an upstart 6 seed or something like that, right? Which was fun. The team building, it's a copycat league. You're absolutely correct. And the copycat league mentality of watching those draft picks get traded, the Rams with the screw those picks kind of mentality, which is a fun,
love that shirt.
Very counter argument, very much like against the grain on that with team building, the way we continue to think about this. Fans are also more knowledgeable, so we have more opinions about those things. It's going to be interesting to see the types of swings. I love the deals we've seen. Von Miller made himself some money going to Buffalo. The Christian Kirk deal is going to be my new contract that I used to say, oh, but is he worth Brock Osweiler money? Now I'm going to be like, oh, but is he worth Christian Kirk money? That's going to be my new thing since the Houston contract. But yeah, fun to see. I also think it just goes to show how competitive this league is, right? It's one of the things I love about football is any team can beat any team in the playoffs, and it throws everything out of whack. Tennessee can come out and beat Kansas City, and games like that can happen. I think we're going to continue to see that. I think with the talent at quarterback and the rules helping quarterbacks, I think that the depth and the parity in the league has just broadened. And once Tom Brady retires, we'll get an even more eclectic collection of players in the Super Bowl. So I'm psyched. I didn't know that was the I didn't know that we haven't had a 1 seed or we didn't have a 1 seed and that it's been so long since that's been the case. That's an interesting stat. I like that. Yeah, and like Jen, kicking it over to you. I mean, we've seen just this past year with just how wild the playoffs can be. And so with teams kind of moving their quarterbacks around, I mean, who's to say that Matt Ryan now with the Colts in the AFC South, they could wind up like getting into the playoffs at a wild card position. Then who knows, like once you get into the dance. So for me, it feels like this is in a more exciting time in the league where it almost kind of feels like these GMs are playing dynasty football, like where they are mortgaging their future and they are trying to make these trades and they are trying to make their teams faster, or like better, faster. So, I mean, are you liking like how this, like, it feels like have like a new big type of like breaking news happening every day, but I feel like this is more exciting now with teams kind of valuing or at least changing how they view building their teams this way.
Yeah, and I think just what Brandon said, like it's a copycat league, right? So people are seeing the Rams, they're seeing what McVay does, they're seeing what the front office does. And you like look at Miami. You've got, McDaniel there now. He's young. He's brought in a different type of energy. They made a bunch of moves and they're looking, towards that same goal of like, look, let's shake it up and see what happens. I don't know. You of course you mentioned Matt Ryan and the Colts, and I just laughed because after we went off the whole John Fox thing, I'm like, not with John Fox there, they're not going to make it. But I'm just kidding. Listen, either way, I think it's interesting. I mean, there was a pretty big. I don't remember this much of a shakeup. I mean, I'm sure each season we say this, but I feel like this offseason there's been a lot of random movement that we usually don't see. And it's been super fun. I'm excited for this season, and it's not even over yet. I mean, there's still a couple dominoes to fall, and then we still have the draft to get through to see, where these guys fall. And I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun season, hopefully, for all of us. Let's talk about that draft now that you're talking about it, Jen. This draft is very interesting to me on a few levels. It's really deep on the defensive line, on the offensive line, really good DBs in this draft.
And those aren't really the fantasy positions. Like, people don't get really excited about any of those positions in fantasy except our good friend Mike Wellert doing the IDP stuff. But for our purposes, in the vast majority of leagues, we don't really know who we're targeting here. This is the first year I can remember in a while where we go into dynasty rookie drafts and we don't automatically know before the draft who the probable 1.01 is. We don't know where these guys are going to get drafted. We don't know if a quarterback's going to go top 10 or slide all the way to the bottom of the first round. So I'm really interested, and I want to start with Malik Willis and quarterbacks in general. The quarterbacks in this class are not considered the way the quarterbacks were in last year's class, where we had bona fide, top-notch elite prospects, 3 in the top 10, 5 in the first round. So, or 4 in the top 10, 5 in the first round. And this year, Malik Willis seems to have risen to the top. He had a heck of a combine, throwing the ball. Looks like he's got a cannon for an arm, super mobile out of Liberty. Followed it up with a great pro day where he threw the ball really, really well. But again, we're looking at a situation. We don't know where he's going to land. We don't know if he's going to start right away. So I'm going to start, Chris, since I think quarterbacks. Is there a good landing spot for a rookie quarterback this year? A landing spot, given the fact that we don't have a Trevor Lawrence who's going to be drafted to be the franchise savior day one. Is there a spot where you'll be interested in a redraft or even a best ball format in one of these rookie quarterbacks?
I think from a dynasty perspective, I think we kind of know where the spots are that would at least allow them to see the field, if not for most of the season or a portion of, whether it be Carolina, Seattle. But I think the one that kind of interests me the most is Pittsburgh at this point, because if you think about the weapons that are currently there, from an offensive standpoint, from Claypool to Deontay, Freiermuth, Najee Harris, who can also catch some checkdowns as well. That seems to be the most, I guess, ripe for the taking right out of the gate. And even though they have Mitch Trubisky under contract for the next couple of seasons, he's essentially being paid backup money at this point. If I'm comparing contracts, even though Teddy Bridgewater has just a 1-year deal, Teddy Bridgewater counts more against the cap this year than Mitchell Trubisky does. So I think at this point, like, that's one of the places that I would be most interested in. I guess that's just from a fantasy perspective, because since I'm a Bengals fan, I still want the Steelers to stay down at the bottom of the AFC North right now. We've got enough problems with Cleveland and Deshaun Watson. But still, I think that's the one that provides the most fruit immediately. But of course, then afterwards, the Seahawks, assuming nothing happens with, I know that there have been some rumors about a Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf getting moved. Rumors at best at this point.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I doubt it happens. But I think if anything, if that was going to actually happen, it would have gained a bit more steam at this point. But with them still needing some pieces along the offensive line, unless, Malik Willis would work, because if you wanted to try and replace somebody like Russell Wilson, Malik Willis could be that guy.
Pretty good comp, yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's where I would probably lean the best, because Carolina, absolute mess. Even if you are excited about DJ Moore and his contract extension, Robbie Anderson, Christian McCaffrey, so on and so forth, the offensive line, and just the way that the team is being run right now with their head coaching staff, I would stay away. So Pittsburgh, Seattle, that's where I'd put my money at as of right now.
Nice. Yeah. Congrats, DJ Moore, on getting that bag. I always advocate for players getting money. He's getting that Christian Kirk money. So I love it. it. Jen, looking at it from a redraft perspective, like very much redraft, I know you always have a very sensible view on rookies going into redraft formats. I don't. I love rookies, and I draft them too early to my detriment, especially running backs. With this being kind of a class at the quarterback position, Malik Willis, we know he's got the dual threat. Is there a landing spot that you see? And right now, Anthony Staggs has him going to Atlanta in the top 10. Is there a landing spot you see where you would be interested because of the dual threat in him in a redraft format, or is it too risky?
I don't think that there's any reason to draft him in a single quarterback redraft league. There's just too many quarterbacks ahead of him, even if he gets, in the best possible spot for him, which we just discussed. I still think that there are, 12 quarterbacks for sure ahead of him. And I just don't see it happening. I think in best ball, like I say, with every time we have these conversations, throw a dart at him and, round 16, 17, whatever. I think that's perfectly fine. But I think for redraft, I see no reason drafting him. And if for some reason he ends up in a spot where he does either start or come in after a few games if something happens to wherever he lands. He'd be on the waiver wire. I mean, I don't think that anybody would actually draft him in redraft, but maybe they would. Who knows? And same with the other guys that are there. I mean, besides Willis, I don't see any rookie quarterback really making a fantasy impact from a regular redraft, not dynasty perspective.
Okay, let's stick with you, Jen. Let's shift to running backs now. So, Breece Hall is a good prospect, probably gonna be the first running back off the board. Kenneth Walker, there's some good running backs, but there's no Adrian Peterson in this draft. Like there's not even really a Najee Harris, like a player that is consensus. This is the best guy. This is the one that I know is going to be a day one impact player. I was trying to think about the fact that it's a situational class, how much the draft is going to impact and where the landing spots actually do make sense, where it's not just murk, where it's actually nice. Because there's not a lot of blue chippers, where's a spot? Where is a spot for running backs that sounds good outside of Houston? Because to me, if Breece Hall gets signed anywhere outside of Houston, I'm scared. I don't know. Where's that spot this year?
There's not a lot of spots. I mean, Houston is really the only actual job up for grabs. I mean, you can make an argument for Atlanta, right? You've got CPAT, and then, you're looking at Mike Davis again. And, can Cordarrelle Patterson be an RB1 for the entire season for a team? Who knows? We're not sure that can happen. So I think that could be a spot, perhaps. Other than that, it's tough sledding out there. There's just a lot of running backs on a lot of teams that already are in a crowded situation. And then you bring in a rookie that, at least at the start, right? If we're talking redraft in best ball, absolutely. You can draft all these guys because you could end up in a situation like last season with Michael Carter and why am I drawing a blank? Elijah, God, what is his name in San Francisco? Anyway, those guys.
Elijah Mitchell.
Thank you. I was like, McGuire, not the right name. Elijah Mitchell. Thank you. But those guys will come on later on the season and add some points to your best ball team. I think that, but other than that, there's just not a lot of room in the running back rooms around the league for, any of these guys to walk in and just get automatic, carries and fantasy points.
I feel like it's just going to be murk. I feel like I'm going to walk out of that draft and be like, oh, now I don't like Devin Singletary as much, or, oh, now I don't like Leonard Fournette as much, or whatever the case may be.
But you love a rookie running back, so don't even pretend like you're not going to draft them all in the first 3 rounds, because you are.
Third round, going to be, yeah. Chris, I know that you're rocking the best ball. I know that's what you're doing. When you're doing best ball drafts right now before the draft, how do you approach rookies in general? Like in general, how do you approach rookies not knowing where they're going to be, but knowing that they're going to cost something because people like rookies and they get excited and they are on the board there when you're in those best ball rooms?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the easiest thing to look at is by position. Quarterbacks is the easiest because we can look at who the current starter is and what their path is to getting on the field. Because for a lot of the guys, whether it was Joe Burrow, even Justin Herbert to a degree, like we can kind of see the path for them to getting on the field as quickly as possible because they're replacing the guy that either retired or is essentially like on their way out. And so that's easy. For running backs, it's a little bit different. I mean, it can be as simple as, well, if Pittsburgh drafts Najee Harris.
But I'm talking before the draft. Like
absolutely.
When you're drafting now best ball, you don't know where these guys are going to go. How do you approach these rookies?
I try and pay attention as much as I can to how's the community starting to value them? Because if we're already have these guys ranked, like for the running backs, we've got Breece Hall, Isaiah Spiller, and essentially Kenneth Walker. Those are the top 3 at their position. And so where are they going in drafts? And where do we even see some of the folks in the draft community? And by draft community, I mean Dane Brugler, Todd McShay, Lance Zierlein. Where are they getting mocked to? Are they getting mocked to teams like with that could have them wind up having first-round draft capital or even having a decent workload in their first year? So if that is that developing a picture of for me to have the draft capital in the situation, then sure, might be worth their ADP. With wide receivers, it's a little bit more different than that because for the most part, it winds up being what's their draft capital going to look like. Day 1, day 2 picks, there's essentially what you're looking for at this point. And with this class, we have at least 5 wide receivers that I've seen typically mocked within the first round. Pickens, Olave, Williams, London, and Burks. Thank you. Yeah.
Burks, who I'm convinced is either Laquan Treadwell or Julio Jones and nothing in between. Like,
wow, that's an extreme range. But you see what I'm saying, though? Like, if those are the guys, you're essentially cutting down on the noise outside of that. You don't have to draft a Jahan Dotson. You don't have to draft a Kenny Pickett. You don't have to draft anybody outside of the 3 running backs that I've already named. If you can start to kind of narrow down your focus to the top players at each position and kind of create a core of players. So maybe 3 rookie running backs that you want to focus on, maybe 4 or 5 rookie or prospect wide receivers you want to focus on. Then it becomes easier for you to navigate the ADP versus saying, well, he's a rookie, so should I draft him or not? And then we'll figure out, and then that's even pre-draft. After the draft capital, landing spot, and all that good stuff, we can talk about that then. But for right now, find a core guys, and then focus on what the draft community is saying about them, their skill sets and whatnot, and see if they can wind up getting the draft capital that you need in order for them to see the field in the first place.
Sure. Jen, when you're in the best ball rooms, because I know you do some early best balls as well, do you have a similar approach to rookies as Chris before they're drafted? And then does it change after the draft for you? Obviously, I'm in the situation, but your approach.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, every year I'll do a few drafts before the draft. To kind of feel it out. This year I have not. I'm kind of in a different mode this year. I think I'm going to wait. I say that, but we still have, another month or a little less. So I may saunter over to the lobby and do a few drafts, but I kind of agree with Chris said. I think, sprinkling a few of those guys on the earlier side is nice, because if they do end up in a super great landing spot, or God forbid someone gets hurt at training camp and someone due to attrition is right there and you snagged them in the 10th round, and then they skyrocket to the 4th round or somewhere in the dead zone or whatever. So it always, it's good to have a little bit of that in the early stages. But for the most part, I kind of, I've been kind of staying away until we know more, at least this season.
Running backs in best ball are getting so crazy anyway, because like I remember a couple of my teams last year that were doing the best late, when that were still in the tournament and still doing well in the late stage of the season. Like the top running backs on that roster scoring each week were like Rex Burkhead and Deontay Foreman.
Sure.
And, it's just crazy the way running backs go. It's almost like taking a stab on these guys, when they land in a situation that's not ideal, but where they might be the Michael Carter, as you mentioned, Jen, might even be a good approach. It's really interesting. Chris, you mentioned the receiver. The receivers are good at this class. They're not like last year, not like the year before, but it is a solid receiver class this season. With Tyreek Hill in Miami and Kansas City looking down the gun barrel of McCole Hardman and Marquise Valdes-Scantling, and
Juju.
That's right. They've got Juju. I forgot about Juju. So they've got these 3 players. Juju, for all intents and purposes, is a slot receiver. Valdes-Scantling is a Z. They don't have an X receiver on that roster. McCole Hardman is somewhere between a slot and a Z. If they use one of those 2 late first-round picks on a receiver, Chris, no matter who that receiver is, does that receiver become the top rookie drafted?
Either him or whoever the Packers take. Because you have to think that everybody is now going to say, well, I mean, Devonta Adams is gone. Who else is going to really soak up some of those targets? I mean, if you go by the law of conservation of targets, then you would assume that if the Packers are now going to invest first-round draft capital into any of these receivers, whom at least that top 5 we consider to be good, outside of, was it Jameson Williams is the one that tore his ACL late in the season? That's correct.
Yeah, we don't know what his status will be. Yeah, that's correct.
So outside of him, the rest should be ready to go week 1, or at least that's the expectation. So the landing spot now becomes key in that point. So those are the two teams where it's yes, if the first round draft capital is there, they wind up and they get the landing spot that we want, then they get propelled anywhere into the 3rd, 4th round. At least that would be my assumption.
Do you think they become the Dynasty 1.01 in that situation?
I don't know about Dynasty 1.01.
Okay.
Running backs and quarterbacks, especially for super flex leagues, but running backs and quarterbacks typically wind up in that spot. Now, with this class being somewhat more nebulous, because I think even a few years ago, there was discussion of N'Keal Harry being the 101.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember
which was a tough class for me and a few other people as well. So it's entirely possible that based off of that, yes, I mean, looking at the quality of play, like for the quarterbacks, and then also just having these like maybe 3 running backs that people are like really interested in, and really just 2 for a lot of folks. I can see that being the case, but I think really they would need to have that 1 first-round draft capital, and 2, they have to get one of those 2 teams.
I love I love old 1.01s. Like, it's always that balance of opportunity versus talent and draft capital, right?
Yeah.
Because my favorite is Bishop Sankey. He's my favorite Dynasty 1.01. Just went to that situation, Tennessee. Everyone thought he'd be the guy. He stunk it up and it didn't end up doing any good. Jen, would that be the exception for you with rookies? If Green Bay and Kansas City go after one of these rookie receivers, would you be hunting them pretty aggressively at redraft and in best ball formats?
Yeah, I don't know about aggressively, but I will definitely try to get my share of them if I can. I would kind of possibly throw Chicago in there too. I mean, I know the quarterback situation is not ideal, but that depth chart is brutal. I mean, after Mooney, you're looking at like names that you've never even, heard, considered. I mean, are you looking at a like CFL or XFL, roster?
How dare you besmirch the name of Byron Pringle? How dare you?
Yeah. So anyway, like I was saying, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah. I mean, Pringle is, Pringle.
The Pringle stands, are they called the Pringlers? Tell me they're called the Pringlers. That's
we'll have to look that up.
Yeah, Byron Pringle. Yeah.
Is there such a thing as a?
There has to be.
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
There are people who've been eyeing Byron Pringle for a while.
I know. I'm just kidding. I have nothing against Byron Pringle, but my point is, I do think that there is, value of getting somebody on that team, because if this new offense in Chicago and the new system and everything comes together and Justin Fields does take that leap, or Andy Dalton, I guess, whatever ends up happening there. But I think that. There's definitely targets to be had, and there's definitely fantasy points to be scored.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I hope it's not Andy Dalton.
Oh yeah.
I just had to throw it out there because it is a possibility.
You're right, but
I guess my only thing with all of this discussion is that, of course, Green Bay, like a wide receiver going to Green Bay, huge for their value. Wide receiver going to Kansas City, especially in the first round, huge for their value. My only question is, do we have to pay the premium on those players? Because at this point right now, we've got 3 other wide receivers currently being mocked to the first round, and at least 2 other teams are wide receiver needy at this point, with, let's say, I guess, serviceable quarterbacks, because the Saints are mocked to picking up a wide receiver. Jameis Winston, that could be okay. And also the Jets are also mocked to pick up a wide receiver as well. They could take like Drake London or somebody like that to play a big slot role receiver. So with the added premium that we would have to pay for the Green Bay, Kansas City wide receiver 1, why can't I just pay cheaper prices for another rookie with first round draft capital that's going to a team that also needs a wide receiver and should also see work and production with an albeit lesser quarterback? But it's just, I feel like I should be able to do that. And it could be at least a smart move, especially in best ball, as we expect rookies to ramp up over their first season anyway. That's just kind of how I think I might be approaching the season, like after we find out what draft slots and draft capital is assigned to them.
What would you put Indy in that list too?
Yeah. Because we don't know about T.Y. Hilton at this point, what his plans are. So,
I mean, I like Pittman, but Ryan's there, right? Ryan's a good.
Mo Alley Cox. I mean, we talk about it every week. I feel like the same, but Pittman and Mo Alley Cox, and then there's a pretty decent drop off. So
because Paris Campbell, we can't really. What is the expectation there, like health wise for him? So it's just I mean, that's another team where it's just if they also made the investment. Again, why do I need to pay the premium for the Green Bay and Kansas City first rounder when I could pay rounds different for if the Saints wind up taking a first round wide receiver, the Jets wind up taking a first round wide receiver? It's just something I'm trying to think through at this point, which is, I don't know, it's a possible.
So we know Green Bay is probably taking a running back and a quarterback in the first round. That's what we assume. They aren't going to take a receiver. Jen, you tend to know more about Aaron Rodgers than I do. You've brought to light his dating history and how it correlates to his on-field success. which is I maintain is the greatest statistic I've ever heard in my entire life. And I'm curious, there's a lot of discussion about his preference for veteran receivers, right? So even if they draft one of those wide receiver ones, one of those guys, are you going to have like a raised eyebrow Allen Lazard? Because he seems like the last man standing, the guy who's entering into a veteran season with Rodgers might have his trust, or maybe even like Amari Rodgers, who basically had a redshirt season as a rookie last year. Would you give preference to those veterans at all? I'm just curious, Jen.
Yeah, I hope that Allen Lazard is kind of a quiet guy that people kind of forget about, because I think at this moment, yeah, I mean, he's there, and Aaron Rodgers does like himself a veteran, and Aaron Rodgers is currently single, as we've talked about.
That's usually the good Rodgers, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the sexless Aaron Rodgers is usually good. However, last season was different because he was engaged and he did have a good season. So I don't know. Last year was kind of the weird factor in all of this, the outlier. So, but this year, listen, you have sexless Aaron Rodgers, you have angry Aaron Rodgers. It could be the perfect storm of a really good season for him. So we'll have to see, what they get. But Allen Lazard is like you said, he is kind of a forgotten guy. Let me look real quick while we're talking what his ADP is right now on Underdog.
I love sexless and angry Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah,
That's
right.
Yeah.
That
could be its own podcast show, I think. Just Aaron Rodgers on there. Yeah, instead of going on Pat.
I'm down for it. So right now he is going as wide receiver 56, and his ADP is 148.6. So, he's cheap. So, if the draft pans out like it always does, and they ignore the position first, I don't know, they can't ignore it this time, but you never know. Then yeah, I think Allen Lazard is probably someone that will either shoot up draft boards when people realize there's nobody else there, or he may quietly be a really good value.
I know I'm targeting him in my early best balls just because I think even if they bring somebody in, I still think he's going to be locked into that wide receiver 2 role there in Green Bay. So I think he's going to have value, and he's just not being drafted that high. So I like that a lot. And folks, if you want to get in on some of the early best ball action, by the way, Underdog right now, we've got a promo. If you deposit $10 into a new Underdog account, a new one, you get a deposit bonus match. Plus, you get a new free 4-for-4 Pro subscription. So if you know you're going to subscribe, or if you were on the fence about subscribing, this is a good way to get that subscription in and also have some fun with some best ball. Just put in 4-for-4 4FOR4 in the promo code box. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I've got this week. It was fun. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, listeners. You can follow us on Twitter at The Monday Mommy, at Chris Allen FFWX, and at 2 Guys Brandon. Thank you so much for checking us out. Have a good day.